and you're married, the groom and the go through the second stage of marriage, and he has the first intercourse with the young lady, with his young bride, what's called intercourse of a mitzvah. We'll ask, actually, truthfully, is sexually with your wife is one of the mitzvahs of a husband to live with his wife and to try to propagate Koravu. It's a mitzvah in the Torah. But this specific, the first mitzvah is called the Bias mitzvah. We'll discuss that in the Kesuvos. Or Porish, and then he separates himself from her. Once he's done that, they are now officially man and wife. They've gone through the second stage of marriage. Now there has come upon them the wedding celebration. They have now like a yontif, a holiday for the bride and groom, and for 7 days they are to celebrate their wedding. And they have Shiva brachas, 7 blessings that they say at the wedding and at the wedding feast, and then later on, whenever they have panim chadoshos, as the Gemara will learn later on, have new faces, new people coming in, or even on Shabbos, you don't have panim chadoshos, you will learn the Kesuvos. Shabbos itself is another occasion for rekindling the joy of the new wedding, and so therefore it's like a yontif for them. So once the yontif is going on them, so they have a yontif. They, for 7 days, they are accustomed, they do the 7 days of a feast, a continual feast, one feast after. And then after the 7 days, afterward, they bury the dead body right after the wedding ceremony and the intercourse. Then they bury the dead body, as Rashi will explain. And then they celebrate the wedding for 7 days, and afterwards, this is now 8 days after the body has been buried, then they start the 7 days of mourning, which is a postponement of the mourning. Ordinarily, after you bury the dead person, you start the mourning period of 7 days. But this is an exception to the rule. Also, in all those days that they are celebrating the wedding feast after the first initial sexual intercourse of the new bride and new groom, he is to sleep among the men, and she sleeps among the ladies, because one of the things that a mourner is not permitted to do in the first 7 days of his Shiva, of sitting Shiva for one of his near relatives, is to have sexual intercourse with his wife.
What about, what's this wedding feast? Is this the feast for 7 days in the old days?
They used to, during those days, they used to have one feast, everything, got a new group come in, they sit down again, they have another feast, and then
a series of dinners.
Yeah, people do it now, even today. You got enough money, you can afford it. They do it, they make a big deal of it. Now you got another incentive to get married. You get to eat.
I don't think unless you lose 45 pounds. You lose 45 pounds, you gain back from the sugar.
Not to eat too much. Pushing me home, and you don't withhold. Takshitin is all kinds of ladies use up to beautify themselves, jewelry and things of that nature, or other things. We'll learn out other things from the Kala, the Jewish lady bride, for all 30 days, first 30 days, where presumably if she dolls herself up, it makes herself more attractive to her husband. I personally don't go for that, but a lot of people like their wives look like a picture. And a lot of advertisements, they advertise if you do this, you paint yourself and everything, and you look beautiful. There again, it's just a question of what you do.
Does this refer to anything besides makeup? Is there anything you do in the old days?
We will discuss next time all these things. Matter of fact, the body of cases will come out. Straight. There's a dispute as to exactly what we're talking about, and they say it's something that the ladies do make themselves more attractive. And now this is a new Gemara, but Davke, but only the father of the groom, or Imosho Kamo, or the mother of the bride. If they die, then we do this procedure. Why? There's nobody else that will be bothering for the new couple to make a new wedding. So if they're gone, you better get it through, otherwise it's never going to happen the second time. But contrary-wise, no, we would postpone the wedding. That's what it says there. Now, I will learn the Rashi on this, and I will learn you Kesuvos on Dalad Nominal. All right, first I learned the Rashi, starting going back, gentlemen, to the big print on where it starts getting wide. The sign like we're learning the Brisa. And Gimel Omid Beis. No, you don't have to turn the page at all. Gimel Omid Beis.
Sanya?
The Kilisanya, learn the Brisa. You have it in Rashi? Rashi is the inner column. Look, gentlemen, where I'm pointing. Rashi is the inner column. You got it? Mr. Bruner, you have it? Could you show it to him, Kilisanya?
It's the last thin line.
Or it depends, the different editions. Sanya, you have it? No, Baruch Hashem. The more times you learn, the more things you will be able to do. And we get new students in here and they won't know the place. You'll point it out to them. And I'll repeat it again because this is a true story. It goes back about three years ago, or more, about 3 or 4 years ago. Mr. Samuels used to come to my shiur I was sitting next to him and he couldn't find the place. So Mr. told him the place, so we're learning. So Baruch Hashem, he said to Mr. Samuel, you must be very learned. So Mr. Samuel laughed, somebody would accuse him of that. So it happened 2 or 3 weeks later. Stein happened to be in the Ark, and my son-in-law was teaching a class to Russian Jews where they were learning. So Mr. Stein showed them where it was. Russian Jews said to him, you must be buried. According to your station, you looks like this way. That's what I'm trying to tell you. So according to your observation, it looks like that I know a lot of Torah. But I can assure you, gentlemen, that I am very small in Torah, if at all. And the only reason that I'm able to teach you at all is by the kindness of God. And I don't go pretend that I'm a big gadol in Israel. Kirisanya, like we learned in the Brisa, Chosin Shemeis Ovi Sheni, and his father died on the 2nd day of the week. You follow me, gentlemen? Brisa, Chosin, a groom, Shemeis Ovi, his father died, Sheni, on the 2nd day of the week. Ve'ein yochel aham, and he cannot wait until the next day. Tzorach lahashos es hameis, you have to have some time to prepare the dead body. Ad she'ikones l'chuppah, before he has to get married. In other words, he has to get married because it's all arranged, everything's ready. V'yenu mazuk, and his wine has been mixed, the mayim with water. She'oyu royal yishtio, so it should be fit to be drunk. But the result of that, no longer will it be able to stand for a long time and maintain the taste of wine. Once it's been diluted, it will lose its taste of wine if it's not drunk in immediate present.
Well, it's sealed or something, like bottles?
No, they used to drink from the barrels.
Nowadays what they do is they bottle it dilutedly?
They dilute it, yeah.
So, but the bottles that are sealed up seem to last for a long time.
Yeah, well, they may have their methods of external, whatever it is. But in those days, whatever it is. Aviv Shechosin, either the father of the groom, or Imushal Kalam, or the mother of the bride. Only these two types. Nokat, where are we discussing? Are we taking? Aviv Shechosin, the father of the groom, he would be bothering with the necessities of the feast. That usually rests upon him to do all those activities. The imo shakalo, and the mother of the bride, he amakino lo takshitin. She prepares for her daughter all the things that the lady needs. Takshitin, your chest, or
is that the same flesh as used before?
Takshitin means translated sometimes as jewelry, whatever the ladies need.
Is that what they're saying? What they said before, the same word about getting ready for the marriage? That she gets 12 months to prepare her. Is that the word?
Oh, that's a good question. And we will look in there, and it says there a different word there. Yeah, right in the beginning, takshitin. Yes, the same word. It's takshitin. So we translated it over there as like a hope chest nowadays. So you can translate it anything, what's necessary to set up housekeeping. Nowadays they have showers where they get together. And I remember when my wife and I were constantly getting married, so her girlfriends wanted to go and help her get her together certain things. And so she said to her, what do you need? She says, I haven't got a single pot. So they had a shower where they had, everybody brought different pots and everything. So you can have a set there and everything. And when we got married, we got about 7 sets of silverware. Nobody coordinated with anybody else. But nowadays they're very, very smart about it. They register with a store and they tell you what there's already been bought and they coordinate it. Shower, so you get this for linens, this for this. It's more organized.
The reason that these two are mentioned because these are the people preparing the wedding.
These are the principal people. If they're eliminated, who's going to do it? This is the problem.
They eliminate after they do it, and not before they do all this stuff.
Unfortunately, they died and the bride and groom get married. They get so excited when it shouldn't happen, but it does unfortunately happen. We're dealing with reality. It's very nice. You should live a long life, and all the way they all do. But when it does happen from time to time. Therefore, if you pass through this preparing this holiday, that the bride and groom will now have a holiday, there's nobody else preparing it for them. So therefore the Chachomim, the sages, permitted them, this young man and young to put the dead body into a room, not to bury it immediately. In king, because if they buried it immediately, Rashi is telling us, there would become set mourning on the mourner. The stimas hagolos. Later on we'll learn when we close up the coffin.
What?
The cover. Close up
the cover the Aron? Or the cover of...
The Gemara will discuss what golo means. There's a thesis that discusses what that means.
What was the Hebrew?
The stimos means the closing golo of the cover.
Is that Elo? Is that Hebrew? Is that Aramaic?
Probably. They are sister languages, Baruch Hashem. The Gemara, it's usually Aramaic. Okay? Kiddukaman, like later on we'll learn out, but actually there's more than one opinion when the period of Avela starts. Sometimes if Avela starts when the body is taken away from the house, say for instance, there are halachas in that, we'll learn it. One is if the principal mourner happens to be, say, living in Chicago, and the body is shipped out of the city or out of the country, a lot of times in Eretz Israel, if you can afford it. Nowadays it's prohibitive. The cost there is over $10,000 just to go and bury a body there.
You mean to ship it there in America, or just to bury it?
Bury it.
The shipping's extra?
I don't know. I don't go into these things. This is beyond my...
Why is it? Just land or what?
I don't go to the particulars. I mean, at any rate, this is the fact of life. So once a person has sent it away, he can start his availers at that point, even though it hasn't actually been buried yet. So but if the principal mourner is in Eretz Israel, he waits until he hears that it's been buried. So this is the difference of opinion. Common, like later on. But once you've had upon him, he has officially made a mourner. Remember, an oval doesn't exist until the body has been taken care of one way or the other. Before that, the person is called an onon. That's a different classification than an oval. An onon is not an oval. You're not permitted to comfort a Jew that has a close relative of him prior to the time he becomes an oval.
Onon is spelled just as like Yehuda's son?
Yeah.
That means someone who's got lost but who hasn't buried.
There is found in Yeridea, in the third section, right near the end of Yeridea, in the third section of Yeridea, the way it's printed now. And there are all the laws of Avelos. And we can sometimes go through it. Like everything else, it's an ocean. You wouldn't be able to get married because once you're an oval and you have to sit shiva, you can't get married at that point. We'll learn the Kesuvos perhaps Sunday or Monday discussing this. Avelos, until the time is passed for Avelos. If you postpone it until the past time of Avelos, we should prepare everything for the wedding again. Once the people that have set it up, we have to take care of the chance, the opportunity. And the rabbis permitted this to happen. Read on top of the page of Dalet and Aleph, the Rashi, or Parish. They have the first section, the course is called the mitzvah, beyond, and then you bury the dead body immediately. The Kiman the Chala alone, Kasuna, once has come upon the new bride, new groom, or the new bride, that's who lost their loved one. This period of being married, Havi Lagabe, its relation to him, Kiregel, like a Yom Tov, and therefore the Avelis period cannot come and push aside the Yom Tov that's already been established by his getting married. You understand that, gentlemen? Good. Well, no, so therefore you first do the 7 days of the wedding celebration, and then after the 7 days of the wedding celebration is over, then you do the 7 days of Avelis. Now, that's not the way we do it. Or you bury the dead person, and right when he's buried, right at the cemetery, that starts the period of Avelis. We have 2 lines of people right there, and we comfort the mourner right at that point, and we continue to comfort him when he goes home and sits 7 days of Shiva. You understand that? Any question? See, the way Rashi explains it, Baruch Hashem, no problem. Of course, in all those days, look inside, in Rashi. Over here, of course, in all those days, Shal Yemei Mishnah, of the days of the wedding celebration, Shal Velas, and also of the next 7 days of mourning, who Yoshin, he's to sleep upon new bride, besides after the first section of the Torah, and they're not to be alone, one with the other. They're literally tashmi. There are a lot of halachas about abelos, about mourning, and there is the makor, the source for many of the halachas of what a mourner is to do or not to do. Strictly speaking, a mourner is to be restricted from, of course, simcha, joy. So that's the reason why we have to have this.
That's the first thing. He's permitted anyway. He's permitted anyway, isn't he?
He's permitted to live with her the first time. And before we bury them, after 14 days, then he lived with his wife, obviously.
This adds the usual period of separation after the first time of this thing, or what?
It may very well. There is a dispute in the Gemara about that. Depends how old. If a bride was born, was of very tender age, she hasn't even got her period yet. Of course, that nowadays is really. And then there is a problem. When is this blood that becomes a blood dam nido? Maybe considered dam psulo. It's blood of virginity, not even considered blood that makes her a menstruant.
How do you get around that?
We discussed it. We'll discuss all that, gentlemen. All of this is in this Gemara. This is a tremendous Gemara. And there are many things. We'll get to everything. But in the 7 days of celebration of the wedding, Regal, they are like a Yom Tov, a holiday. He still has to go, even though it's a celebration and a simcha, he still has to go and have avelus in things of a personal nature, not public. Nahainu, Easter Tashmish, that's prohibition to have sex with his wife. Like later on we'll learn out. The Gemara talks about this case of in avelus. That discusses a case there. You heard of Rabbeinu Tam, gentlemen? Rabbeinu Tam was Rabbeinu Yaakov and Rabbeinu Meir. Rabbeinu Meir was the husband of one of the daughters of Rashi. He was also a student of Rashi. One of the Rabbeinu Meir sired 2 great Balei Tesvis. One is Rashbam, Shimon ben Meir, who was a tremendous gadol, and his younger brother, Ben Rabbeinu Meir, was called Rabbeinu Tam. Was even a greater gadol than his brother, if you can imagine such a thing. Rashi was born approximately in 1040, died in 1105. The Rabbeinu Tam was born about 1100 and died in 1170. So he was the next generation. He was the gadol ador of the next generation. And the Rabbeinu Tam used to be accustomed when they would go to daven on Shabbos to be called up to Shlishi. Every time they called him up to Shlishi with his Kriyas HaTorah. So it happened that once he became an oval. So the Shabbos didn't want to call him up because he felt that the oval was not supposed to have simcha, but he wasn't a learned type, and he didn't want to call him up. But Rabbeinu Tam went up there alone, and he told him, and the Dvorim Shabbos, An oval is not supposed to display publicly that he's an oval. Only on the weekdays, not on Shabbos. But even on Shabbos, he's not permitted to have sex with his wife, which is a private matter. The Hebrew tzino, words and things that are done in public. Paesia usually described as words of knowledge of Jews. Okay, gentlemen? You understand all that? Okay, fine. All right, now that we've learned this little part of the Rashi, let's learn perhaps some Kesuvos. Let's learn the Kesuvos on Dalet, Amud Aleph. You have them, gentlemen? The top Kesuvos. You have it? With us, mitzvah portion. You have it too? Everybody has it. He has sexual intercourse, which is a sexual intercourse of a mitzvah, and then he separates. Kodem, before Sheikovar makes, before they bury the dead. Achar Sheikovar, but after they bury the dead, lo, not permitted to have sex with his new bride. Kiriyan in the stomach, like we say nearby. Things that are done privately, no it. They do have this thing of they do not do this. In other words, they do not have sex with their wives when they have lost a loved one. Even during the time, the first seven days when they have celebrating the wedding feast. After the initial sexual intercourse, which was done prior to him becoming a noble, which was a call, but this is not to be done because this is private. And the second 7 days, which is also officially normal. And we deduce this with the Ketoni, because we learned she sleeps between the women. Cool. Furthermore, the ratio from the first part of here, we might not be able to deduce what we just said. Perhaps when the dead body is in a separate room, is he permitted to have the first sexual intercourse of a mitzvah? We might push it aside and argue, mitzvah, what does it mean to have sex, which is called a sex of a mitzvah? Even after there comes upon him the law of being an oval, you might think to say that. So therefore we come to let us know, no, that's not the case. Once he becomes an oval, once the dead body's been buried, you're not permitted to have sex, even if you have the 7 days of Simcha.
How long does that go?
First 7 days of Simcha, then the 7 days of Avelis or Shiva, and then after, that's permissible if she's not a nido. Kasha, the Rashba, was difficult to the Rashba. The Rashba was a great total. All right. Why don't we deduce this? In Ketoni or Porish, since we say he's supposed to make cloud, from here we learn out a generalization, and knowing the Borim Shel that presumably that means he has to accustom himself not to do things that privately that upset any concept that a regular oval is not to do. Mizloa eater alabilas mitzvah davka. Alabilas mitzvah davka, only the sexual intercourse of a mitzvah alone. So presumably we'll learn out from that, deduce from that, any other kind of sexual intercourse, no. Omari, and the Re answers, it says, the Hali Motzi labor, we could say, perhaps interpret it in a different way. The Porish, what does it mean by separating? Rishum Dam Pasulim. Perhaps he has separated because there's the end of the first flush of blood that comes out from breaking the hymen of a Pasula, of a virgin lady, is not considered dam, the blood which makes her a menstruant, but it's dam psulim. It does not make her a menstruant. Perhaps the blood dam psulim. Taniko, like in the chapter Taniko Nidos, in the Gemara Nido, which discusses all these laws, on the 65th folio on the stubble on the second side, Havel they show who Yoshim. But once you use the language, he sleeps among the men and she sleeps among the ladies, Naik Shopper, this is a good deduction. True, correct. Shopper means correct. The Havi Mushum, it must be because there is mourning.
Shopper is Hebrew?
Shopper means
It's Hebrew, isn't it?
Could be.
Is Shapiro derived from there or not?
There's a Shopper could be Hebrew or Aramaic. They interchange these in the Gemara.
Yes.
So it's not really, you don't have to worry about what it is, you just know what it means.
Daik, we deduce, Shafir, correctly. Mavelos, because it is because of mourning. The Mishum Nidos, if it was because she became a menstruant, and therefore that's the reason he had to separate from her. Kimin Dabo, once he has sex with his wife, she can sleep with sleep with him in the same house. We'll explain later on. As a matter of fact, once you're married to the lady, you can sleep in the same house with her, even though there's nobody else in the house. You're married to her. And we presume that once a man has had sex with his wife, he can control himself until she's permitted to have sex with him again after going to the mikveh, after a proper taras mishpacha period. You understand? Because he's already had sex with her. It's not like he never had sex with her. You know, when you've never had sex and you have such a tremendous passion for her, this way you can control yourself for a couple of weeks until you can have sex with her again. You know that a Jewish couple has to go and keep having relationships. This it consists of a married lady, when she's at the beginning of her period, she's not supposed to live with her husband when she's bleeding. Every month there's usually ladies during childbearing years have a period where they bleed. How much they different type of lady. Some ladies bleed 1 or 2 days, others bleed 5 or 6 days. A minimum of 5 days for a married lady has to be waited from the beginning of the bleeding period. After that, when it stops, the lady examines herself, cleanses herself, changes her garments, and examines herself by natural sunlight in the early morning and late afternoon for 7 days. The 7 days of when she doesn't see any flow. At the end of 7 days, now you've had 5 days, and 7 days, it's 12 days. At that time, she hasn't said that, and there's been no interruption with flow or anything of improper flow. Sometimes she has a flow that's white or yellow. That is not blood. If it comes brown or red, then you have to discuss with a competent raw if the lady sees a flow and breaks the piece of the dicker cloth to him to see if she's in need or not. But the safer, everything went all right. And at the end, near the end of the 7th day, after she cleanses herself, she takes a bath, she combs her hair, she pares her nails, and does everything necessary to prepare herself to go to a kosher mikveh. And she goes to a kosher mikveh under the supervision of a religious Jewish lady, and she immerses herself at least once completely in her body and everything, including her head and everything, a fraction of a second underneath the water. At that point, when she gets up, sometimes they do it twice, but once is sufficient for her. And after that, she becomes permissible to have sex with her husband for the next 2 weeks or so, until the next period is beginning to start. And there are rules. It's set out right in English, and the rules are set out. It's not very difficult to do it, and we can discuss it with you. Also on Yomim, all those days, Mashma, the Kulu, all these 14 days, and all these days, Havichad Tamid, there's one reason. Because there's Mamavelis, because the body has been buried. Even though the first 7 days we have Simcha otherwise, other than private things. The Raisa now we're making more leniency by Aninos. Here's the way you spell Aninos. Here, look at Aninos. This is the honor, which is a Torah law. The first, before the body is buried, the person is not an oval, he's an honor. He's an honor, and the Torah permits him, sort of frees him for any obligation to do anything. And he just concentrates on preparing, getting the dead body buried. Ninos, you have it there. You have it
well. Well, English is a little different from mine.
Well, maybe it's a little different, but it's the words there. Aleph, Nun, Vav, So, Aninos. That's the period of being an honor. Aninos, that's prior to the dead body being buried. Before the follows the beginning of the Raisa. The first day, a person is an honor.
Is that usually transliterated with O-N? Or
Aleph, Nun, Yud, Well, I'm a very bad speller, I'm sorry. it's carried over. In English, I can't improve at all. Just they gave me smicha, maybe a rabbi, and everything. And still I have my deficiencies. They remain. No matter what language you have, I'm for law of the rabbis rather than there where they would take off their shoes. They, a noble should not wear leather shoes. What you wear is what you wear on Yom Kippur, Tisha B'Av. You wear usually shoes not made out of leather. Well, leather is one of the prohibited things.
It's a luxury as well as.
Tifas Rosh.
Is that? I'm sorry, wasn't that a luxury, sir?
No, that's just it's a halacha. One of the things that a owner is not supposed to go and take a bath. He's not supposed to go and. You should listen very carefully. Not to wear regular shoes. What if a person is an onon and he has a skin condition? It happened to me. My father, which all passed away. I developed a rash. And my Rabbi, one of my Rabbanim, I was sitting Shiva in Hammond, Indiana, and he came all the way from Chicago. Very nice of him. My mother was very beside herself. She's got a terrible rash. He refused to take a bath. By the time I was not a rabbi yet, I didn't. But now I know Baruch Hashem, it's a Mishnah Shabbos, I'm in Baruch something, that if you have a tender skin and everything, you're permitted to take a bath for health reasons. It's just not for pleasure. In some way, the pieces, Vito used to turn over the bed in the house, not knowing to do that nowadays. And different customs, how to show Averos. Right.
Was this because of the fast? I thought a lot of this
Could probably be. You probably have a good point.
Could you use wood or something? Is wood prohibited? Wood shoes like sandals?
You could wear anything except leather shoes.
So will they use the word
You
sandal?
could wear
What's the original
You
sandal?
could wear just stockings.
What's the origin of the word? Is there Arabic word or what?
Rabbi Shalom, I don't know that.
The old days, right?
They could have all kinds of. All right, I can go to the word genealogy right now. Milas mitzvah. Why do you call it sexual intercourse? Second mitzvah thing of a sexual intercourse that's called a mitzvah. Live sexually with your wife. So it should be all considered a mitzvah. Why is it specifically the first? It says it's called a mitzvah. The one that has the first sexual virgin lady, her husband, is like he makes her a vessel. I mean, I'm reading the Gemara. The Gemara said in 22 on the second side of the folio. 80 shikok aresis brief. Usually, this is a general rule, not necessarily all the case. A lady doesn't really cut a covenant, doesn't really get more attached to her husband. Al-Lamisha also keli, the one that makes her a vessel, that brings her in the first sexual intercourse of the man. So this is she's more attached to him. So it's called a mitzvah because obviously, if your wife loved you more, you will live with her more, and that will be as a chef to bring the mitzvah for a rule. Why they come through this way? The two will multiply. Therefore, we call the first sexual intercourse. And a lady Vila will hold this point, gentlemen. The next station we'll discuss how soon after a death can an oval get married.
Yeah, this is
The language of the beginning of Parsha.
this is January 10th.
And that's the first posik in the Parsha. The God of Midas Adin speaks to God, Moshe, but he says, I am God of mercy. Elohim lo shadayut. The word Elohim is the language of a judge. Until God will come to matter of vote, that means to the judges. Elohim. And if a man sins or not against another man, God will judge. Again, we're talking about Hashem, Roy, Rachmim. This is the standard of God acting as merciful. We're talking about the 13 attributes of mercy that God displays. And where Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to know these attributes. God says every time the Bnei Yisrael will break me with these attributes, I will listen to their prayers. We say this every year. We say these things. So here another explanation. Moshe, God spoke to Moshe. Rabbi Ezra says, Moshe said to him, the Holy One must be to Moshe, Ani Shamarti. I spoke and the world existed. And we're talking about the Rabbi Hashem. God spoke and the world existed. Anisha Marti Avraham Avichem. I said to Avraham, your father, your forefather, being of the Breach, being the story, the covenant between the people, your seed will be 400 years. Aksho, Hellas, Mos Lafonai. This is it's a moment of emergency. You come before me, you look at their inheritance, not in the proper way. It comes time that I have to go and take out his children from Egypt. And you're saying to me, Shlachni, I had you want to send by. Now's the time. It's got to be done now. Don't give me aces. It's got to be done now. If you show Omer, Moshe, God spoke to Moshe, Moshe. I am to be believed, to pay the reward to Yitzchak, the son of Abraham, who was prepared to go and give his Rabbi stop. That's the amount of blood that a person needs in order to keep on living upon the
life's blood.
He didn't give any blood.
Is that the phrase, his life's blood?
He has life's blood, like it would be something like that. That's the minimal amount that the body can still have and still live. It's a measure of blood. That could be something of that nature, but maybe a larger amount, but not too much. Anyway, a minimal requirement. If the person loses too much blood, he can't survive, but that much he needs. Now, Marty Lo, and I said to him, those are Alcho Bnei Musal. Your seed will be great and everything. All right, next page, gentlemen. One more page, and then we'll call it a share. I'm sorry, no question about it.
So why did God test him? He wasn't testing this at that time.
Certainly was. No question about it.
At that time, they went back to the golden calf.
He was testing him because he had given him the responsibility to plead for the Jewish people. If he did not rise to that challenge, he would have been failing his responsibility. He certainly was being tested. He was being tested, and he passed with fire. You have to be destroyed because they worship idols. And it's good. They made a God. The God can help you. He can help you. He can go and make the rain fall, or the winds blow, and the Chicago. He says, if he can't do any of those things, where are you coming around to being the call of a God is a God? Where is it appropriate for you to react the way you're trying to react? Because they make an idol, that makes him a God? The reason he broke the tablets is that God should not have any tangible evidence that they accepted. He broke the tablets. If they can't keep any of the other mitzvahs, they can't exist either in one thing. And besides that, whatever he was protective of the Jewish people, which is exactly what God asked him to do in the first place. So he was being tested. Oh, was he being tested? And he was passing the test one after another. No question about it. Not too many Mesherabim. In order to not profane the God's name, the Jewish people must be saved. And he does that time and again. I will do it for the sake of my name, God says. Built the whole in order it shouldn't be profaned in the eyes of the goyim. I share nodati I'm known to them as the God of Israel. If I don't protect my people, let's say I have no power, or their idols were all powerful, and I'm seeking to take them out of Egypt, and you're saying send them by the person that you want to send by. But we'll hold this point, gentlemen. We'll continue from this point next time. That's when things happen, and if they have to be done in a certain timing, then we have to rise to the challenge and do them. All right, so believe that we'll continue at that point. And if you have any questions, you can ask them next time.